Growing up in a small apartment on the south side of Chicago, Dean Washington would sit by the window of his family's kitchen, flipping through old food magazines his mother brought home from her housekeeping job at a downtown hotel. He'd stare at the glossy photos of perfectly plated meals for hours, dreaming of the day he could taste such incredible food. One day, he told his grandmother while helping her cook Sunday dinner, "I'm going to eat at places like that. And maybe even own one." His grandmother just smiled and handed him another potato to peel. "Dreams need work behind them, child." And work he did. After school, Dean took odd jobs, delivering newspapers, stocking shelves at the corner store, tutoring younger kids in math. Every dollar went into two jars, one for college, one for fancy food. The food jar let him try one new restaurant every 3 months. He'd save up, research carefully, and dress in his best clothes. Then he'd take a bus downtown, walk in with his head held high, and order just one perfect dish. "The way some folks look at me," he told his friend after being seated near the kitchen at a steakhouse, "you'd think I stole my wallet instead of earned what's in it." But these experiences taught him as much about business as they did about food. He noticed everything: how staff treated different customers, what made a dining room feel special, why some places thrived while others failed. After putting himself through business school with scholarships and night jobs, Dean built his investment company from scratch. Starting with managing retirement accounts for his old neighbors, he grew his client list through pure determination and honest work. By 42, his firm handled millions in investments, though you wouldn't know it from talking to him. He still lived modestly, drove the same car for 10 years, and kept close to his roots. His one luxury? Food. He became known in Chicago's restaurant scene as a serious diner with a remarkable palate and knowledge of cuisine. When he heard that Le Royal, a fancy French restaurant downtown that had been losing money for years, was quietly up for sale, something clicked. This wasn't just any restaurant. It was the very place where, 15 years earlier, a host had asked him if he was delivering something when he arrived for a reservation. "That's the one," he told his lawyer after reviewing the financials. "That's the restaurant I want." The purchase happened quietly. The previous owner, an older French chef who wanted to retire, seemed relieved to hand over the keys, especially when Dean insisted on keeping all the current staff employed during the transition. "They don't need to know I'm the owner right away," Dean explained to his business partner. "I want to watch, learn, and make changes slowly. See how things really work when the boss isn't around." His plan was smart. For the first 6 months of ownership, Dean visited as a customer, sat in different seats, ordered different meals, and observed. He'd hired a new chef who refreshed the menu while respecting its French roots. He fixed the leaky roof and upgraded the kitchen equipment. He adjusted prices to be fair but profitable. All this time, only the general manager and head chef knew who really signed their paychecks. To everyone else, Dean was just a well-dressed customer who seemed to really enjoy French food. Sometimes, he told his mother over Sunday dinner at her house, "You learn more by watching than by talking. And what I'm seeing gives me ideas for making this place special, a restaurant where everyone feels welcome, no matter what they look like or where they come from." Little did he know, his approach would soon be put to the test in a way he never expected. 6 months had passed since Dean bought Le Royal. The restaurant was starting to turn around. Tables were filling up on weekends, and reviews mentioned the improved service and updated menu. Still, no one except the general manager and head chef knew that the well-dressed customer who sometimes asked thoughtful questions was actually signing their paychecks. On a cool Tuesday evening in October, Dean checked his watch as his car pulled up to the restaurant. He adjusted his midnight blue tie and buttoned his charcoal gray suit jacket. Tonight wasn't just another observation visit. He was meeting Gloria Chen, the owner of 5 popular hotels, who was considering having Le Royal handle their room service and event catering. This deal could double the restaurant's revenue if it went through. "I'll be back at 10:30, sir," his driver said as Dean stepped onto the sidewalk. "Thanks, Ray. Enjoy your dinner break." Dean arrived 15 minutes early on purpose. He always liked to get a feel for the place before business meetings. The hostess, an older woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun, smiled as he entered. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, table for 2 under Washington. My guest will arrive at 7:30. The hostess checked her book and nodded. Of course, Mr. Washington. Would you prefer the window table or something more private for your meeting? Dean glanced around the dining room. Tuesday nights were usually quiet. Only about a third of the tables were occupied. His usual spot in the VIP section was open, but tonight he wanted to see how things ran in the main dining area. Something in the corner would be perfect, he said. I'd like to talk business without shouting. As the hostess led him through the restaurant, Dean noticed an unfamiliar face among the staff. A tall, thin man with sandy hair who looked about 30. He was arranging wine glasses at the service station with quick, efficient movements. Is that a new waiter? Dean asked casually as they reached the table. Yes, sir, that's Preston. He started about 2 weeks ago. Came with excellent references from the Meridian downtown. The Meridian was an old-school steakhouse known for its traditional service and exclusive clientele. Interesting choice for Le Royal, Dean thought. He hadn't been involved in this hire. He trusted his manager to build the team, and so far that trust had paid off. He'll be taking care of your section tonight, the hostess added as she pulled out his chair. Perfect, Dean said, settling in. I look forward to it. As the hostess walked away, Dean took out his phone to review his notes for the meeting. The deal with Gloria's hotel chain would be transformative for Le Royal, but he wanted to make sure it was the right fit. His business philosophy had always been simple: grow steadily, treat people right, and success will follow. From his corner table, he could see most of the restaurant floor. The bartender was chatting with a couple at the bar. 2 servers were resetting a large table for an upcoming reservation, and Preston, the new waiter, was taking an order from an older couple by the window, writing carefully on his notepad. Dean watched how Preston leaned in slightly to hear the woman's question, how he gestured toward the wine list with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. First impressions: professional, attentive, could hire. When Preston finished with the couple, he turned and noticed Dean sitting alone in his section. Something flickered across his face, so quick Dean almost missed it. Was it surprise? Confusion? Dean couldn't quite tell, but he straightened his posture slightly as the waiter approached his table. Little did he know, this interaction would change everything at Le Royal. Preston approached Dean's table with slow, measured steps. He didn't have his notepad ready or the friendly smile he'd shown the older couple by the window. Instead, his expression was tight, his gaze fixed somewhere above Dean's head. "Can I help you?" Preston asked, his voice carrying none of the warmth Dean had observed from across the room. "Good evening," Dean replied with a polite smile. "I'm waiting for someone, but I'd like to see a menu while I wait." Preston didn't move to get a menu. Instead, he glanced at Dean's suit, then back to his face. "Sir, are you sure you're in the right place? This is Le Royal." His tone suggested Dean might have wandered in by mistake. "Our main courses start at $60. The comment hung in the air between them. Dean had faced this kind of treatment before, too many times to count. That quick assumption that he couldn't afford to be there, couldn't belong in such a place. The familiar burn of it settled in his chest, but his expression remained calm. "I'm quite sure," Dean said evenly. "I have a reservation. Washington, table for 2. Preston's eyes flicked toward the reservation book at the hostess stand, then back to Dean. "I see." He still made no move to retrieve a menu. "You should know we have a dress code here." Dean looked down at his custom-tailored suit, which had cost more than Preston likely made in a month. His shoes were Italian leather, his watch a subtle but expensive Swiss brand. His appearance was impeccable, and they both knew it. "Is there a problem with what I'm wearing?" Dean asked, his voice level. Preston's mouth tightened. "No, but," he trailed off, then added, "the bar area might be more comfortable for you while you wait for your friend." At a nearby table, an older white couple was seated, the man wearing a suit that was noticeably less formal than Dean's. Preston had greeted them warmly just minutes before. 2 tables over, a group of young white professionals laughed loudly, their voices carrying across the restaurant as they spilled some wine. Preston had done nothing to quiet them or suggest they might be more comfortable elsewhere. The hostess, who had overheard the exchange, started walking over with a concerned expression, but Dean gave her a small shake of his head. He wanted to see how this played out without interference. "I'm comfortable right here," Dean said. "Could I see the wine list? I'd like to order a bottle for when my guest arrives." Preston hesitated, then reluctantly pulled a leather-bound wine list from his apron and placed it on the table without opening it. The sommelier can assist you if you have questions about pricing. That won't be necessary, Dian said, opening the list himself. He scanned the selections and looked up. I'll take the 2015 Chateau Margaux. Preston's eyebrows rose slightly. The Margaux was one of the most expensive bottles in the restaurant at over $900. Are you certain, sir? The doubt in his voice was unmistakable. Perhaps I could suggest something more accessible. I'm certain, Dian said, closing the wine list. I've had it before. It pairs well with your duck confit. Something flickered in Preston's eyes, surprise that Dian knew the menu, or perhaps recognition that he'd misjudged the situation. But instead of correcting course, Preston seemed to double down. Very well. I'll need to see a credit card before I open a bottle of that caliber. At no other table had Preston requested a card before serving wine. It wasn't restaurant policy. Dian knew this because he had written the policy himself. Just then, the front door opened and Gloria Chen walked in, dressed in an elegant burgundy pantsuit. The hostess greeted her warmly and began leading her toward Dian's table. That won't be necessary, Dian told Preston, his voice quiet but firm. My guest has arrived. Please bring the Margaux and 2 glasses. We'll order food shortly. Preston's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly and walked away just as Gloria reached the table. Dian stood to greet her, pushing the uncomfortable encounter aside. He had a business dinner to focus on, but he wouldn't forget what had just happened in his own restaurant. Dian Washington. Gloria extended her hand with a warm smile. It's wonderful to finally meet you in person. The pleasure is mine, Dian replied, rising to his feet. Thank you for making time in your busy schedule. As they sat down, Dian pushed the unpleasant interaction with Preston to the back of his mind. Years of navigating predominantly white business spaces had taught him a valuable skill, compartmentalizing discrimination to focus on what mattered. Right now, what mattered was this dinner, this potential partnership, this woman whose hotels could transform Le Royal's future. I hope you don't mind, Dian said, but I took the liberty of ordering the 2015 Chateau Margaux. It's exceptional with several dishes on our menu. Our menu? Gloria repeated with a raised eyebrow and slight smile. So the rumors are true? You're more than just an investor in this place. Dian laughed softly. The business community in Chicago wasn't small. Let's just say I have a vested interest in your experience tonight. Preston returned with the wine, his movements stiff and formal. He presented the bottle to Dian without meeting his eyes, then opened it with practiced efficiency. When he poured a taste for Dian, his hand trembled slightly, spilling a few drops on the white tablecloth. I'm so sorry, Preston mumbled, reaching for his cloth. It happens, Dian said calmly. He tasted the wine, let it linger on his palate, and nodded. It's perfect, thank you. As Preston poured Gloria's glass, then Dian's, his service remained mechanical. None of the warmth or enthusiasm Dian had observed him showing to other guests earlier. We'll need a few minutes with the menu, Dian said. Of course, sir. Preston placed 2 leather-bound menus on the table and walked away quickly. Not the friendliest service, Gloria commented once Preston was out of earshot. Perhaps he's having an off night, Dian replied diplomatically. Tell me more about your hotels. I was particularly impressed with your approach to local sourcing. For the next 20 minutes, they discussed business, room service logistics, special event catering, menu customization. When Preston returned to take their order, Dian was thorough and precise, requesting minor modifications to show his knowledge of the kitchen's capabilities. The duck plays, but could you ask Chef Rosario to prepare it the way he did last month for the wine dinner? With the cherry reduction rather than the orange. Preston's eyes widened slightly at Dian's familiarity with the chef and special events, but he simply wrote down the request without comment. Throughout the meal, Preston's service remained coldly professional. Water glasses went unfilled until Dian had to request refills. When Gloria asked about ingredients in her dish, Preston gave short, uninformative answers. When they ordered dessert, he forgot to bring Gloria's coffee until reminded. Yet through it all, Dian remained unfailingly polite. He thanked Preston for each dish, made eye contact when speaking to him, and left appropriate spaces in conversation for Gloria to ask questions or add comments. "You have remarkable patience," Gloria noted as Preston walked away after another curt interaction. "Most people I know would have complained to management by now." Dean smiled. "My grandmother used to say that how you respond to disrespect says more about your character than the disrespect itself." He took a sip of water. "Besides, everyone has bad days. I try not to judge someone's entire character based on one interaction." But as he watched Preston laugh and chat animatedly with the white couple at the next table, Dean knew this wasn't just a bad day. This was something he'd faced his entire life, different treatment based on the color of his skin. Still, he wouldn't let it ruin this dinner or this opportunity. By the time they finished their dessert, Gloria was enthusiastically discussing contract details for all 5 of her hotels. "I think we have the beginnings of a wonderful partnership," Gloria said, raising her espresso cup in a small toast. "I couldn't agree more," Dean replied, clinking his cup against hers. The business part of the evening had been a resounding success, despite Preston's best efforts to make it otherwise. As the evening wound down, Gloria checked her watch and sighed. "I hate to cut this short, but I have an early flight tomorrow." "Of course," Dean said. "Let me take care of the bill." He raised his hand slightly, and Preston approached their table with visible reluctance. "Will there be anything else?" "Just the check, please," Dean replied. When Preston returned with the leather folder, Dean opened it, glanced at the total, and slipped his credit card inside without comment. The dinner had come to over $400, but the potential contract with Gloria's hotels would be worth millions. A worthwhile investment by any measure. Preston took the folder and walked away. Dean noticed him squinting at the name on the credit card as he approached the payment terminal. "I've really enjoyed this evening," Gloria said, gathering her purse. "Your restaurant suggestions have always been excellent, but this place is special. I can see why you invested in it." "It has potential," Dean agreed. "With the right attention and care, I believe it could become one of the best restaurants in the city." Preston returned with the receipt for Dean to sign. As Dean added a generous 25% tip, because staff shouldn't suffer for one person's behavior, he saw the restaurant's general manager Thomas crossing the dining room toward their table. Thomas was one of the few people who knew Dean owned Le Royal. Dean signed the receipt with a small smile. The moment was about to arrive. "Mr. Washington," Thomas said warmly as he reached their table, "I hope you've enjoyed your meal with us tonight." "It was excellent as always, Thomas," Dean replied, standing to shake the manager's hand. Preston's face froze in confusion as he watched the interaction. The general manager rarely greeted guests personally unless they were celebrities or... "Ms. Chen," Thomas continued, turning to Gloria, "it's an honor to have you dining with us. I hope we'll see you again soon." "You certainly will," Gloria replied with a smile. "Mr. Washington and I have been discussing a partnership between Le Royal and my hotel group." Preston's eyes widened slightly, darting between the 3 of them. Dean could almost see the wheels turning in the waiter's head. "Wonderful news," Thomas beamed. "Mr. Washington's vision for this restaurant has been transformative. We're lucky to have such a hands-on owner." The word owner landed like a physical blow. Preston's face drained of color so quickly that for a moment, Dean was concerned the man might faint. The leather check folder slipped from Preston's fingers and clattered onto the table. I didn't realize." Preston stammered, his eyes now fixed on Dean with dawning horror. Other diners at nearby tables turned to look. The older couple Preston had been so attentive to earlier watched with open curiosity. One of the cooks peeked out from the kitchen doorway, sensing something significant was happening. "Is everything all right, Preston?" Thomas asked, noticing the waiter's distress. Preston opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "Yes, sir. I didn't know Mr. Washington was the owner." "For 6 months now," Thomas confirmed, clapping Dean on the shoulder. "Best thing that ever happened to Le Royal. He's saved all our jobs and turned this place around." The look on Preston's face was one Dean had seen before, that terrible moment when someone realizes they've badly misjudged a situation, when all their assumptions come crashing down at once. Any satisfaction Dean might have felt was overshadowed by a deeper understanding. This moment wouldn't change Preston's behavior unless it changed his thinking. Ms. Chen, it was a pleasure, Dian said, turning away from Preston's stricken face to shake Gloria's hand. I'll have the contract drafted and sent to your office tomorrow. Perfect. And next time, I'm taking you to dinner at one of my hotels, Gloria replied. As they walked toward the exit, other staff members nodded respectfully to Dian. The hostess smiled warmly. A busboy held the door. All of them knew who he was, even if Preston hadn't. Behind them, Thomas was speaking quietly but firmly to Preston, whose shoulders had slumped in defeat. Outside in the cool evening air, Gloria turned to Dian. You know, I was wondering why you put up with that waiter's behavior all night. Now I understand. You were testing your own restaurant. Dian shook his head slightly. Not testing. Learning. There's a difference. Dian arrived at Le Royal the next morning just after 10 a.m. The restaurant was quiet, with lunch service still 2 hours away. A few kitchen staff were prepping vegetables and making stocks, but the dining room stood empty except for Thomas, who was going over invoices at the bar. Good morning, boss, Thomas said, looking up as Dian entered. Preston is waiting in your office. He's been there since 9:30. How is he? Dian asked, hanging his coat on the rack by the door. Thomas shrugged. Nervous. Keeps checking his watch. Refused coffee twice. Thanks for arranging this, Dian said, clapping Thomas on the shoulder as he passed. Want me to join you? In case things get heated. Dian shook his head. Some conversations need to happen one-on-one. The walk to his small office at the back of the restaurant gave Dian time to gather his thoughts. All night, he considered how to handle this situation. The easy path would be to fire Preston on the spot. No one would blame him. But Dian had built his business life on looking for harder paths with better outcomes. When Dian opened his office door, Preston jumped up from his chair like he'd been shocked. His face was pale, his tie slightly crooked. The polished, confident waiter from last night was gone, replaced by a man who looked like he hadn't slept. Mr. Washington, Preston began, his voice unsteady. I want to. Dian held up a hand. Sit down, please. Both men sat, the small desk between them. Through the thin walls, they could hear the muffled clatter of pots from the kitchen. Before you say anything, Dian said, I'd like you to answer one question honestly. Not what you think I want to hear, but the truth. Can you do that? Preston nodded, swallowing hard. Last night, why did you treat me differently than your other customers? Preston stared at his hands folded in his lap. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of distant kitchen preparations and the soft tick of the clock on the wall. Preston started, then stopped. He took a deep breath. I made assumptions about whether you belonged there, whether you could afford it. Because I'm black, Dian said simply. Preston's eyes flickered up, then back down. Yes. Another long silence. Thank you for being honest, Dian finally said. Most people would have made excuses or denied it entirely. Preston looked up, confusion replacing some of his fear. Aren't you going to fire me? Is that what you want? No, I need this job. Then tell me this, Dian interrupted gently. If I walked into any other restaurant in this city today, would I get the same treatment from someone else that I got from you last night? Preston hesitated, then nodded slowly. Probably. That's the problem I'm interested in solving, Dian said, leaning forward. Not just you, not just here. It's bigger than that. From his desk drawer, Dian pulled out a folder and placed it on the desk between them. I was planning to roll this out next month, but we'll start sooner. It's a training program on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias in customer service. Every employee at Le Royal will participate, from dishwashers to management. Preston eyed the folder cautiously. And you want me to take this training? I want you to help lead it, Dian replied. Preston's mouth fell open. What? Why would you trust me with that after how I treated you? Because you've just had the most powerful lesson possible about why it matters, Dian said. And because people who've made mistakes often become the most effective advocates for change. Dian stood up and walked to the window overlooking the alley behind the restaurant. Here's my offer. You can leave today with 2 weeks' pay and a standard reference, or you can stay, Help develop this training based on what happened between us and become part of making Le Royal the kind of place where everyone feels welcome. Your choice. 6 months later, Le Royal buzzed with Friday night energy. Every table was filled, and a small crowd waited in the bar area. The partnership with Gloria Chen's hotel chain had brought in new customers, and word had spread about both the excellent food and the restaurant's welcoming atmosphere. Dian stood at the back of the dining room, watching with quiet satisfaction. His grandmother would have been proud, not just of his success, but of what he'd built here. A place that treated everyone with the same respect, no matter what they looked like or where they came from. His eyes followed Preston as he moved between tables, serving a young black couple celebrating an anniversary. Preston's manner was warm and attentive as he described the evening specials, making recommendations with genuine enthusiasm. When the woman asked about wine pairings, Preston offered thoughtful suggestions rather than pushing the most expensive option. "He's come a long way," Thomas said, appearing at Dian's side. "We all have," Dian replied. The training program had transformed Le Royal from the inside out. At first, some staff had been defensive or skeptical. Change was never easy. But Preston's willingness to share his own story, to talk openly about the assumptions he'd made about Dian and what he'd learned from that night, had broken through barriers others couldn't. "Table 7 is asking for you," Thomas said, gesturing toward where Gloria Chen sat with 2 hotel executives. "They want to thank you for the complimentary champagne." "I'll stop by in a minute," Dian said. First, he wanted to check in with the family that had just been seated by the window. A black father with 3 teenage kids who looked slightly uncomfortable in the upscale setting. Dian remembered that feeling all too well. As he approached, he overheard the father saying, "Now remember, this is a special treat for your mom's birthday. Best behavior, okay?" "Welcome to Le Royal," Dian said warmly. "First time dining with us?" The father nodded, sitting up straighter. "Yes, sir. My wife has always wanted to try this place. It's her birthday tomorrow, but she's working, so we're celebrating tonight." "Well, we're honored you chose us for such a special occasion," Dian said. "I'm Dian Washington, the owner. Anything you need tonight, just ask." The youngest kid's eyes widened. "You own this whole restaurant?" Dian laughed. "I do. And I recommend the chocolate souffle for dessert. It's not on the menu, but our chef makes it specially for birthdays." As he walked away, Dian saw Preston approaching the family's table, menus in hand. There was no hesitation in his step, no change in his friendly expression, just a waiter ready to provide excellent service to every guest. Later that evening, after most customers had left, Dian invited the staff to gather for their usual end-of-week toast. These small celebrations had become a tradition, a moment to recognize achievements and strengthen the team. "Another record week," Dian announced, raising his glass of sparkling water. "The hotel catering contract is exceeding expectations, and we just got a call from the City magazine. They want to feature Le Royal in their Best of Chicago issue." Cheers and applause filled the room. "But more important than any review or contract is what we're building here together," Dian continued. "A place where the food is excellent, yes, but also where every person who walks through that door feels valued." Preston stood near the back of the group, but Dian caught his eye and nodded slightly in acknowledgement. After the toast, as staff cleaned up and prepared for tomorrow, Preston approached Dian. "I never properly thanked you," he said quietly. "For what?" Dian asked. "For not firing me when you had every reason to, for seeing something in me I didn't see in myself." Dian smiled. "My grandmother had another saying, sometimes the people who challenge us most teach us the most important lessons. You reminded me why I wanted to own a restaurant in the first place, not just to serve good food, but to create a place where everyone belongs." Preston nodded thoughtfully. "I'm bringing my parents here next week. They've never eaten at a place like this before. They're a bit nervous about it." "They'll be in good hands," Dian said, patting him on the shoulder. "After all, their son is now our head training coordinator." As Dian walked through his restaurant one last time before heading home, he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Le Royal had become more than just a successful business. It had become proof that people could change, that assumptions could be challenged, and that sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect wasn't anger, but opportunity.